Good evening. How is the volume? Is it too loud? We good? Okay, awesome. I'm Angela Metler. I'm an administrative assistant in the president's office at South Dakota Mines. Welcome to Steam Café for August. Steam Café is a partnership with heightened Brewing and South Dakota Public Broadcasting. So we appreciate their support and we appreciate you guys showing up every third Tuesday of the month. We are also broadcasting this live on Zoom, so thank you to those of you who might be attending virtually. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, so anybody in the room can ask the presenter questions. Anybody who happens to be on Zoom, if you have a question, you can either type it into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will make sure that it gets answered live. So I would like to introduce tonight's presenter, Dr. Jonathan Gibson from our Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences Department.
Let's see if okay, sounds like my microphone is working. Thank you for all attending. I'm happy to be here. I actually feel somewhat privileged that I get to study something that I think is really interesting, but also relevant to everything that we do. And so I'm going to kind of share and provide kind of a framework of these different concepts. And I think most of us have heard of mindfulness and meditation. Does anybody really know what these are, though? You're just like the rest of us scientists, okay? There's a lot of confusion in the literature, and so what I personally do is I try to kind of create a conceptual framework to help understand what these constructs really are and how they apply to your life and how you could benefit from understanding these things. And so I'm going to provide a little bit of background and context. When I first started studying interoception, if you don't know what that is, it's just an awareness of the internal state of your body. We have all of these sensory receptors that help us understand the external world, but we have a whole bunch of receptors that help us understand the internal world. And this is actually critical to everything we do. But when I started studying this 13 years ago, it was a fringe topic. And there's been major leaps in our understanding of this sense and this process that is critical to everything we do in our everyday lives. And so that's what I'm going to basically share with you. Now, in the last 10 years, it's kind of exploded in all kinds of social sciences, specifically my discipline, which is psychology, but we see it in neuroscience and we see it in the cognitive sciences. And we recognize interoception as we can look at it from a developmental standpoint, from womb to tomb, right? Or we can look at it from a therapeutic standpoint, because people who have really poor interoception are suffering. Virtually all of our mental health disorders are associated with poor interoception. Okay? So we look at it from a therapeutic standpoint. We look at it from a developmental standpoint. I'm looking at it from a contemplative standpoint. So when I started studying this, I thought, can we increase our body awareness if we're meditating? And there was one study done at the time, and they said, no, you can't. And I'm a lowly graduate student in the middle of my dissertation reading this, having an existential crisis. I cried. Because these were all the big names in the literature. I knew all of them, and they were really well known and famous, and they're like, you cannot. But I'm stubborn and hard-headed. My wife isn't here, so she could have confirmed. And I just go, I think we can do this. And it turns out I was right. We can increase interoception through meditation, and so we're going to walk you through that. And then we're going to describe how this is all relevant to virtually everything you do. So what is meditation? Studying it for 13 years, practicing it for 13 years, this is how I would define it for you guys. And it's just how we focus attention. That's it. Because when you hear these terms, if you're like my students, you invoke an image. Somebody sitting cross-legged and oming. You can do that, that's fine, that's a cool meditation, and I run a meditation club on campus, and we've done that from time to time, and students enjoy it. But that's just one type of meditation. And so I want to demystify this for you. It's all about attention. So how you focus your attention and where matters. Because how you focus your attention and where will activate different parts of your brain, different neural circuits. And they all produce kind of different effects. And so we have all of these different kinds of meditations. And they're all different ways of focusing attention. There's a mantra meditation. You focus on an idea or a key word, and you just keep focusing on that word until there's nothing else in your brain, and it's silent. Anybody ever practice this? And you get to that silence? That's like being a man. Silence in your head. Welcome to manhood. But there's a breathing meditation, and if you don't know anything about breathing meditations, there's dozens of breathing meditations. We want to engender that same outcome. We want silence. Okay, and I'll talk about the brain circuits and why we want that silent in a minute. But that's the goal. You're focusing on your breath. It's great. Then there are body scan meditations, and that's kind of like you use an internal scanner inside your body, and you just try to bring awareness to all of your sensations. How do your calves feel? And you're like, oh yeah, I have calves. They're there. Their calves are sending you information always. You're just not aware of it because you're not paying attention. And so these are what we call like a focused attention meditations. And then you've heard of mindfulness, and I'll describe that and explain that in a moment. I have a handout. This is an open monitoring meditation. It's a very different kind of attentional style, and it produces different effects. You have a different psychological experience. Then we have visualization techniques and loving or kindness meditations or compassion meditations where you try to foster and develop kindness or gratitude or love for someone. These can have really profound effects. So let's go back. Attention regulation is the basis for all meditative techniques, and it's the prerequisite. Trying to figure out where I can stand without that feedback. It's the prerequisite for all these beneficial mechanisms to take place. So how you focus your attention and where is critical, and then the benefits come from it. But there are different meditations that produce different outcomes, okay? I really want to emphasize this. Attention precedes all of our other cognitive functions. How you think about this. So what if Angela told me that you are all a bunch of suspects in a criminal investigation? I'm going to attend to you as if you're a potential threat. That's going to change how I feel. That's going to change my interoception. It's also going to change how I think, and then how I behave and how I perceive you. Or she could say there's a potential mate in this room, and that's going to change how I attend to you, probably. Or maybe not. But it changes things. So the attentional style that you bring to bear on your world changes everything. That's what I really want to emphasize. If, 13 years, how you attend to something changes everything. Okay? And so when you apply it to meditations, you can understand attentional style or meditation as a focal point. So you want to bring your heartbeat into your awareness? Focus there. You can do that. You can close your eyes and you go, can you detect your heartbeat at rest? Okay. Or you can visualize something. And you can visualize, being successful or whatever. That's a different attentional style, and they all change how your brain works in different ways. So just think of it as a focal point. Okay? And if you really want to investigate something, maybe you need to read it. So I have my little handout here. And if it's too far, I have poor vision, I can't really read it. So I go, let me see it real close. Still can't see it. You got to get that right distance to explore what you're interested in. And most meditations are actually interested in increasing interoception. And so if you look at it from a, let's say a Buddhist tradition or a yogi tradition, they all emphasize that you have to be grounded in your body before all the benefits take place. You need to be grounded there. You need to have enhanced interoception. Okay, so mindfulness, what is it? So meditation, attentional style, how you focus your attention. Mindfulness, it's also an attentional style. It's how you attend to the present moment. Okay? So this is a nice definition from John Kabat-Zinn. It's the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. How many of you get on automatic pilot, right? We all do. Now we know that we spend most of our day on automatic pilot. You're like, no, I'm in control. You're like, oh, are you? Are you sure about that? Because we look at your brain and you're not. And it's pretty fascinating. The problem with mindfulness, and so I'm going to champion mindfulness for a lot of things, but in some of my research that I've published recently, I'm critical of it. because it's so broadly defined and loosely conceptualized. Because no, it's not just a meditation, it's a lifestyle. Okay, that's fine. You live your lifestyle like that. Okay, in the Buddhist tradition, it's meant to cultivate truths about your lived experience. Okay, how do you measure that? Okay, is it a state of being? Can you be mindful right now? This is, we call what, dispositional mindfulness? Yeah, you can. And if you are consistently mindful in many states, will it become a trait or a characteristic? And the answer is yes, it can. And they go trait mindfulness. And I'm going to make the argument we're describing something different other than trait mindfulness. So the problem is like mindfulness has been really broadly defined and loosely conceptualized, and it encompasses all these different kinds of things, and that's been problematic. So let me give you an example. It was about 13 years ago. No, it was about 10 or 11 years ago, actually. I've been here for 10 years, and I was talking to someone on campus about my interests, and they go, oh, really? They told me about a study done at Pine Ridge, and they go, because we've heard like there's a lot of benefits to meditation and mindfulness, and they go, so they're working with this population who have gone through some stuff. They've experienced some trauma, and they go, let's teach them mindfulness. And they taught them, quote unquote, mindfulness, and it actually backfired. What they taught, they actually didn't teach them a mindfulness meditation, they taught them a body scan meditation. And it's a very different attentional style, and it actually made things worse for this population, for this group of people, because they went through some real serious trauma. We'll explain all of that in a moment. Okay, so my approach to this is we have to be clear on what these constructs are. We have to understand them so we can apply them properly and understand them properly. So just think of meditation, it's an attentional style. Mindfulness is a really useful attentional style. So it's how you attend to the present moment. And I would include being open and receptive and non-reactive and non-judgmental and just allow things to happen. And we are good with that as long as I don't say anything that could be potentially triggering. We love talking about religion and politics, right? We are not being mindful, right? No, we don't. I know. And because that triggers us. And it's very difficult for many people to be mindful when we start talking about these things. But acting with that awareness and not on automatic pilot empowers us because we become aware of what we're doing. And if we're not aware of what we're doing, how can we change it? In the end, that was a rhetorical question. You can't. Okay? So it's very useful. All right, so interoception. So that's what meditation is. It's just an attentional style. Mindfulness, same thing. It's an attentional style. It's a useful attentional style. So what is interoception? It's just an awareness of the internal state of your body. And why is that important and why does that matter? Well, it's critical to everything we do. So first and foremost, we all heard of homeostasis, right? This is the basic idea that our body is constantly communicating with our brain to make sure it's functioning optimally. You want that optimal balance. If you're hungry, what does your stomach do? Okay, it starts to contract, and we feel it, and that sends signals into your brain going, we need to eat, and then it releases a bunch of hormones that starts to trigger your appetite, because we need to eat in order to maintain that balance. And what we found is that all of these different physiological functions to maintain homeostasis, to keep us alive, to keep us functioning, are sent to a region of the brain, and your brain then translates those functions, like heartbeat, gastric contractions, pH balance, but your brain will then translate those into feelings and emotions. And why does that matter, Dr. Gibson? Because I teach all my students this. Feelings and emotions drive everything. Nuh-uh. My engineering students go, nuh-uh. And I go, huh? Okay? And so what we realize is that, and we've known about this for a long time, there's a lot of different models out there, but 130 years ago, William James goes, you have a physiological sensation in your body, and that leads to an emotion. And we didn't really like that because it was really simplistic. But back in, I think it was about 1990, 91, a researcher named Antonio Damasio goes, no, he's right. We've got really good data. He calls it the somatic marker hypothesis. And the soma means body in Latin. So we go, this is the body marking hypothesis. And what happens is what we realize is when things are important to us, we'll mark it with an emotion. Whether it's a healthy and adaptive emotion, like love or joy or peace, or fear or threat or anxiety, our body will mark it. And this is the region in the brain that does that. It marks and it translates all of our signals, all of our bodily signals into feelings and feelings and emotions drive everything. It's our currency for awareness. So it's how you are aware of yourself, how you are aware of others. Oh man, that's sexy. You see the green part? It's very sexy. Okay, so I'll get back to that. That's called the insula. Nobody talks about this part of the brain because this is the part of the brain that translates everything. It does so much. And what blows my mind is, as I started studying this, we realize it's the least understood part of our brain, and it's the most underestimated. What you can draw from in this point is that the insula and interoception is involved in everything you do. But we love talking about all these other regions. We love our prefrontal cortex. We love our amygdala. It's down here in the hippocampus. And so let me give you a quick structure of the brain. It's incredible. Anybody know how many neurons we have, brain cells we have in our skull? 100 billion. Do you know how much you had when you were born? 100 billion. They're all there. What happens as you develop and age is your brain starts making connections. And that's what the brain is all about. It makes connections. It helps us make sense of our internal world and external world. But when you start, it's the brainstem that's developed. It's the rest of the brain that develops after birth and during birth as well. Okay? You start making connections really early on. And you're making connections based upon experience. And so this is really cool. But we don't know what to do with the green region because it doesn't fit all of our other models. So let me just give you one model that I use to teach my students, and we call it the triune brain model. There's 3 basic structures to the brain. So it's a handy model, it's a pun. This is our central nervous system. This is our spinal cord right here. And then once we get into the palm of our hand, this is the brain stem, okay? The brain stem keeps us alive. It's fully developed, okay? And it manages and controls heartbeat regulation, gastric functions, pH balance. We don't ever think about that. Could you imagine if you had to think about that consciously? We'd all be dead today. I'd be dead in 5 minutes. I can't multitask. I'd be like, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Breathe, 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 breathe. Why does my chest hurt? Oh yeah, heart. You got to beat. And we'd all be dead. That's all developed. But these other structures that come up later, that develop later as you're aging, are critical for emotional development, memory, and like our basic drives. And we call this the limbic system. So the brain stem's right here, and we wrap our thumb around in the limbic system, okay? All mammals, let me backtrack a little bit. All reptiles have a brain stem, just like ours. That's it, though. And my son had a lizard, and he tried to tell me the lizard loved him. Doesn't have the neural circuitry for love. Does your dog, though? Yeah. And neuroscientists love putting dogs in these fMRI machines, these scanning and then they'll show a picture of their owner, and the regions of the brain that we associate with love and positive affection, it just lights up in dogs. They do love you. He didn't like it when I told him his lizard didn't. I'm a cruel father. Maybe if I had this microphone, they'd listen to me better. Okay, and so this limbic system is really important. And then we have the cortex. This is the outer shell of our brain. Okay, this is the part of the brain that allows us to experience and understand the external world. It's all of our external senses, all of the visual sensory information, the auditory, taste. Actually, taste is processed here. But everything else. And so we didn't know where to put the insula. So, because it doesn't fit in the triune brain model. And so they go, maybe it's limbic, maybe it's prefrontal, maybe it's sensory motor. They didn't know what to, and they just kind of ignored it, which blows my mind. Because as we're going to get through by the end of today, in this presentation, you'll go, whoa, that part of the brain is cool. And you go, Dr. Gibson was right, that is sexy. This region right here is super important because it sits in our brain and it allows us to process the internal world and also have a dialogue with the other parts of the brain that process the external world. It's uniquely situated because that's where you are. You're a human being, you have an internal and external world, and it's critical to be able to navigate both. Okay, so we love this part. So it's the least understood and underestimated region of the brain, which is interesting to me because it's central to what I think it means to be human. Because these are not just cool brain stuff. This has implication. What does it mean to be human? If we understand that region well, it can give us some insight into it. I don't have the answer, but I invite all of you to go explore. You get to figure that out. Okay? So his name is Bud Craig, and his first article was in 2002. And this article is in 2009, and what he did is he summarized literally hundreds, if not thousands, of neuroscience studies, and these things just kept popping up. It's like the insula is involved, the insula is involved, the insula is involved, and he kind of put together a coherent narrative, and it says, there is compelling evidence that the anterior portion, this is the anterior, it's the front part, this is the mid part, this is the posterior part. They all do different things. But he says the anterior part contains the anatomical substrate for the evolved capacity of humans to be aware of themselves, others, and the environment. The anterior portion of the insula with adjoining areas, so I'll point them out to you. The ACC's right here, the prefrontal cortex right here. So I'm going to show you actually another image here. There we go. So the ACC, the insula, these are all dialoguing with each other. And what it's doing is it's representing the sentient self in human beings. You have qualia, what philosophers call qualia. That's the kind of ineffable, really difficult to describe feelings you have. And it's these difficult to describe feelings that exerts its presence on you, how you feel about yourself. So right now you are having a sentient moment, and the insula is doing that. And here's the news. This part of the brain is fundamentally shaped by the environment at birth and immediately after, for good or for bad. Okay, so in short, the insula is involved in all of our subjective feelings. No other brain region is, and the only commonality is they engage the awareness of the individual. Nothing else is. And so that's really interesting. So we talk about the insula and the salience network now. And it's critical in everything we do. So what does meditation have to do with interoception? Well, when you meditate, you increase your interoception because it's also the only brain region that's activated and modulated or shaped, reshaped through meditation. It's the only one. Why? Because that's your experiential self. I am breathing right now. I'm watching Dr. Gibson through my eyes, and I'm hearing him through my ears. It's all the insula. There's other regions in the brain that are involved as well. But this is the only one that shows up every time. So it's also the part of the brain that directs attention. I could make it real awkward and not say anything for 20 seconds. You stand here, and what are you guys going to do? Your mind's going to start wandering. Yep. It's like, oh, geez, this guy's blowing it. Mind wandering. And then I go, hey, pay attention real quick. And you go, oh, okay. Hey, look. It's the anterior portion of the insula that actually gets you out of mind wandering and goes, I need to focus on this. It's the part of the brain where you attend to something. And how you attend to it makes a big difference. So anybody good at math? We think we have about 100 billion neurons in our brain. And each neuron has roughly between 5 and 25,000 connections. So how many connections are in our brain? 500 trillion, that's my guess. And I actually borrowed it from a mathematician. And that's what, I don't do math. I do psychology. And so what we see here is, in this little region, you probably have billions of connections. And they all do different things. So right now we've categorized it into 3 regions, but there's newer research that's trying to create like 12 regions. And they're like, look at what these regions are doing. It's pretty fascinating to me, okay? So interoception is linked to, as a reminder, awareness of the self, we'll get there, how we relate to and connect with others and our environment. It's also critical for managing stress and emotions, which is critical for well-being. The hallmark for psychopathology, which is psychological disorders, is stress and emotional dysregulation. They can't control their stress or emotions. And so that might look like in hypoactivity of depression, they just can't pull themselves out of this deep depressed state. And on the opposite end is hyperactivity, which is panic. Okay? They can't control it. And so interoception is linked to all of this, okay? And so I just had my most recent paper accepted for publication, and I talk about this in great deal, and I kind of describe and explain how meditation modulates the salience network, which includes the insula, and the default mode network. We're not going to talk about that one. It's not that important, actually. It's very important. I shouldn't have said that. It's very important. It's not affected by meditation as much as these other two regions. Okay, these are the two regions that show up consistently. Okay, and so let's jump into the default mode network. Okay, so if I don't say anything for 10 seconds, your mind is going to start running. Actually, you don't have to show my hands, but usually it takes 15 minutes for your mind to start wandering. Anybody's mind start wandering yet? You start thinking about something else? I'm totally offended, by the way. It happens. This is why I at 15 and 20-minute intervals, I show videos to my students. Stick with me, okay? And they pull out their phone. Okay, so the default mode network, it defaults. When you're not focusing on something, your brain defaults to this circuit. And what does this circuit do? Well, it's fundamentally shaped by the external world and the roles you play. What roles do you play? Well, I'm a father. Husband, I'm a professor, I'm a poor golfer. That one hurts. Bruh, it's a rough season. And I want to ask you this question. When you go through and identify all your roles, who are you behind all those? So let's do it. I want you to do this. I want you to introspect. I want you to go in and say, what's my next thought? Try it. See what pops up. And I'm assuming, if you're like most of us, nothing popped up. It was dead silent in there. So the roles you are playing, who you think you are, isn't shaped by you. It's shaped by what? The external world. The problem with this, though, is the default mode network. So the brain is like a muscle. Whatever you use consistently, you'll strengthen. And if you spend most of your time in the default mode network, it works with another center. There's a left language center. So the brain's split in two, and we produce almost all of our language in the left hemisphere. And so the left hemisphere and the language centers in our hemisphere are constantly dialoguing with the default mode network, and it's creating your identity. This is who I am. So when I say, hey, tell me about yourself, well, you go, well, yeah, I'm Professor Gibson, and I do this, and he's not good at golf. And you go, oh, that's who he is. Is it? Okay? We over-identify with this concept. Because what happens is we take these ideas and we apply them across time. Oh yeah, he's outgoing. Oh, he's friendly. He's an introvert. He's a jerk, right? And some of us are, if you guys can, it's a really obvious example when you think of high school. If you can go back, for me, that's a few years still. But when I was in high school, I had roles. I remember my group of friends, and I had my role. I was the funny one, because I wasn't good looking. No, I'm the funny one. And other people who maybe, let's say, struggling with their weight, for example, they're like, well, I'm fat. And you're like, no, you're not. What a weird phrase, right? I am fat. No, you're a human being. You have fat. But we get caught up in being a certain kind of person, and we over-identify. I'm this person. And it's like, then do this. Because who you think you are was shaped by the external world. So if you guys can read, like predict where I'm going with this, guess what happens if you go into the interoceptive world? That maybe, and I make the argument, that is who you are actually. So when you go inside into your internal world, things change. And hopefully for the better, but for some of us not, and I'll get there. Okay? Let's see, make sure I get everything. We love to describe how many of you guys do this? My kids are experts at this. They don't know why they behaved the way they did something stupid. I'm like, why'd you do that? And they give me the dumbest explanation ever. That had nothing to do with why they did it. But we do this all the time. And they've done a lot of cool experimental studies that adults do it too. But we'll give an explanation for something, but we really don't know. And for a lot of people, it's actually emotions that they're not aware of that's driving their behavior. But they're not aware of their emotions because they're disconnected from their body, so they make something up. And we do it all the time. All right, so let's go back to the insula. Oh yeah, where's my image? Oh, there it is. Yeah, cool. Look what else it does. So it's not only the hub for interoception, its primary responsibility is to take those physiological sensations and create the currency of awareness. It is to make feelings and emotions which guide and direct everything else we do. It's also the center for attention and intention. So you go, I'm going to wear a blue shirt today. That was my choice. That's the part of the brain that shows up when you make a choice. I can intend to punch you in the face. I won't. Okay? But that's where it is. So this is critical. This also makes a heck of a lot of sense how meditation modulates and shapes this circuit, okay? But then our sense of self. And so when my dissertation took me a long time because when I started diving in, there were layers of complexity that I had to unpack. And so I'm looking at the literature and I go, I think I want to do this. And I run a pilot program, a pilot study to get an idea. And that lasted 5 weeks. So I asked a bunch of my students as a graduate student teaching, hey, you guys want to participate in my study? I'll give you extra credit. They go, okay. What I want you to do is do a focused breathing and a body scan, and then just describe your experience. And then I start reading their descriptions, okay? And what blew me away is what a bunch of them started going, you know what? Just in 4 weeks too, by the way. I feel different about myself. I no longer over-identify with the roles that I'm playing. They even use terms like, I found my real self. I was like, how'd you do that? You're 18 years old. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm still looking, right? Okay, so our sense of self. There's a specific kind of neuron. Study just came out last year. No, it was this year. They've identified over 3,000 different brain cells, all doing different things. But these ones are really interesting, and they're only found, guess, in the insula. And they think these are the neural origins of identity because almost all mammals who can pass the mirror test, you guys know what the mirror test, if you put an elephant in front of a mirror, they recognize it and goes, hey, that's me. You put the lizard in front of it. They don't recognize themselves. I don't know how that lizard survived. It was dumb. And we put the cricket right in front of its face and he misses it. Anyway, but we think these are the neural origins of identity. Why? Because interoception causes us to feel who we are. It exerts a stabilizing influence on ourselves. So let's try it. Just kind of pay attention, do a quick body scan. How do your calves feel? How do my knees feel? My legs, my quads, my hips, my belly. Some bellies are feeling pretty good right now. Okay. This is a different self. This is the self that observes. It can't be observed. We don't know how to measure this self. There's no way to. I don't know how to get access to your consciousness, but it's coming right through here. Okay? So, very, very cool stuff here. This is what my latest paper was on. The hub, it's the hub for all of our pain processing. Ow, I hit my shin. Yep. There's parts in the brain that have a map of your shin, and you're going to feel it there, but it hurt emotionally because you stumbled or something and you hit, and you're like, ah. okay? You process all pain here, physical, emotional, and social pain. And I want to kind of like suggest to you how you understood pain as a child is how you're going to process pain as an adult. Okay? Because emotional pain hurts. Ah, she broke my heart. It feels pain. By the way, this isn't a fun fact, but it is a fact. The strongest correlation, one of the strongest correlations we see with chronic pain in adulthood is childhood trauma. It hurts to be neglected as a child. And so you don't know how to process that as an adult, so it manifests as physical pain. Lots of studies showing that. Okay? It's the hub for empathy. What's the difference between empathy and sympathy? My students don't know. Some of them do. Sympathy is a cognitive appraisal. Ooh, I bet that did hurt your shin. Yeah, I could imagine. Empathy etymologically means to feel into someone else's experience. So when someone's crying and you're like finding yourself crying because you're caught up in the emotion, that is what empathy is. And if you have, an ideal childhood where your parents loved you and supported you and cared for you consistently, guess what you're going to be good at? Empathy. But only if they were empathic with you. If they neglected you, guess how you're going to turn out? Your brain is just going to do and encode the experiences you had as a child. So we're going to talk about attachment later. Our ability and how we attach and connect with people is fundamentally shaped in the first few years of your life. Okay? How we evaluate the trustworthiness of others, and by implication, trust in yourself. Do I trust this person? Do you know someone who just, their trust mechanism is totally haywire? They're trusting the wrong people? And you go, God, what's wrong with you? Well, there's probably something wrong with him. But I would actually suggest that we reframe it. Not what's wrong with you, what happened to you. Because if you had a good and healthy childhood, you would be better at this. Okay? Perception of time. You know how time slows down? And they've done really cool fine-grained analyses with some of their morphometric imaging technology. And so they're looking at what's going on. And what happens is it goes through a fine-grained analysis. It goes through every cell. And that's why our perception of time can slow down, because we're really focusing on that moment. And so it's getting encoded with great clarity. Okay? Do children have a good perception of time? They don't understand time at all. That's why 2-year-olds lose it, right? You guys remember a toddler and they're like, I want a donut. And you're like, no, not right now. And then, rah! And they throw their tantrum. And we're often at Walmart and judging the parents. That was like that. And then side note, my youngest was like my best kid. My oldest was my best kid. And he didn't ever throw a tantrum at all until we were at the store and he asked for a candy bar. I was like, no, we're not gonna have a candy bar. I was on the floor and I'm like, what happened to you? What happened? And he just lost it, he lost control. They don't have a perception. So why did I bring this up? Because they don't understand something can happen in the future. They just understand this present moment. So if they are harmed in the present moment, guess what they're going to expect in other present moments? Same thing. You ever had someone just constantly sabotage things because they're expecting things to go bad? Okay? Our feeling of knowing, our gut feelings, our intuitions. By the way, the VENS, there's one other place where these neurons are stored in your body. It's in the insula, and anyone have a guess where else? Yep. So we have a brain here, and we have a brain here. And they've watched it in the development of the unborn child, and they're watching these specific neurons form part of their limbic system, and then those same neurons go right into their gut, the same exact neurons. Your gut is an extension of your limbic system. Or your brain's an extension of your gut. It's the same. Okay? So there is empirical scientific evidence to ostensibly support this concept of a gut feeling, which is pretty cool on my mind. But do you ever know someone who goes, I got a bad feeling about this? and nothing ever bad happens? Mom? Just kidding. One time she got it right though. She's like, how'd you do that? She's like, oh. She's like, I got a bad feeling. No, that's called anxiety. Yeah. Past experiences influence our present judgment and perceptions. How? Feelings. Well, have you ever had a conversation with someone, maybe it's a romantic partner, well, I feel you're going to do that. I didn't do it, but I feel it. Okay, you want a hug? They're responding to their past. They feel with great conviction. It's not that they're responding to their past. They feel with great conviction that they are responding to the present moment. They are not. Okay, so how does meditation do all of this stuff? So let's go back to the default mode network real quick. It's the external world. It's who you think you are. And it's not like, I think I'm this person. It's, no, tell me about yourself and you describe yourself. I'm an engineer. Oh, okay, I have kids. I have a boat, whatever. And they're sure it's the case. But when you meditate and you deactivate, because what happens is that part of the brain, the mind wandering, shuts off. We want that part to shut off because it's been running the show for far too long. And so we deactivate the default mode network, and we activate the insula and the salience network. And remember, the anterior portion, the frontal part of the insula, is directing attention. And so it's constantly in dialogue. It's paying attention to what's going on in the internal world, but it's also listening to the frontal lobes and how it's processing the external world. So it's trying to integrate all of these different forms of information to create a global, coherent sense of self. So where is it going to focus attention if we shut off the external world? Well, it's going to attend more fully to the anterior or the posterior region. So I want to just show you this. This is what's going on. So we shut this part of the brain off right here, and they go, well, where do we pay attention? Oh, we'll pay attention back here. And what happens is you literally rewire your brain. So if you don't know what a brain cell looks like, just think of it like as a tree. You have a complex root system. We have the trunk, and then we have the branches, and they're all just connecting that way. And that's basically what's going on is those branches are rewiring. Focus on it, then sleep. Focus, then sleep. And when you're sleeping, it rewires itself. And so we do pictures, we do this cool imaging stuff with our, in neuroscience, and we go, whoa, we do a before and after picture, right? Before you meditate, we're going to take a picture and we're going to look at this circuit. And then 8 weeks later, we're going to look at it after you've meditated every day for 5 to 10 minutes. And it restructures it, it rewires it. And all of a sudden, you have all of this information that's going on, shaping who you think, or shaping your feelings and your emotions. And all of a sudden, you're aware of it now. Now, because these same pathways, wait, where am I at? Yeah, the same pathways help us manage stress and help us regulate emotion. How do you regulate emotion if you're not even aware of it? You ever had a conversation where they're obviously mad and you're like, are you okay? You seem like you're kind of mad. I'm not mad. Okay. So we want to bring all of that information into our awareness, and we want to shut this part of the brain off. And what happens after 6 to 8 weeks are people like, I mean, I just saw a study that was published, I saw it this morning. It takes 4 weeks. And we see this stuff works. It helps you manage anxiety. Okay? So there's going to be less mind wandering. There's going to be more awareness of the internal state. There's more, which means you're going to be more aware of yourself, more aware of your habits and patterns that you can change. And it's true for children all the way through late adulthood. We can restructure our brain. Okay? So I talked about the posterior to anterior progression, taking that information from the back of the insula to the front so you become aware of it. And what we're talking about here is this basically increasing our connectivity to this internal state. It's like going from 3G to 5G. All of you can activate your insula right now just by focusing on your chest. Okay? Okay, cool. Do that every day for 10 minutes. And in 4 to 6 weeks, based upon my research, because I followed a developmental trajectory, and it's about For some people as early as 3 weeks, and some people as late as 5 or 6 weeks, with exceptions. But usually somewhere in between that time frame, you'll start noticing things. And my students will say this, well, it's like, I'm noticing, I'm more calm, and I'm sleeping better, and when you're more attuned to your body, you're healthier. I don't want to eat that. I want to spend more time out in the sun and in nature. Good. Take your earbuds out and go out into nature. Touch grass, as the kids say. Okay, so you have a more consistent online representation of interoception and all of its associated benefits. This is what's happening. These are the two most robust findings in thousands of studies. We know it deactivates the default mode network, it being meditation, and we know it activates the interoceptive network, leading to enhanced interoception, or the salience network, sorry. So when I was originally doing my research, I was looking at the mindfulness literature, and I'm looking at the interoception literature, and I'm going, they're the same. But I taught my participants a non-mindful meditation. That is, you don't have to bring mindful attentional style to your body to get these benefits. But they're saying, oh, mindfulness does that. And I'm saying, actually, I don't think that's the case. It's interoception. Okay? So we want to be more empathic, more intuitive, more emotionally aware, regulating, better decision making, all of these things. Well, as I tell my kids, check in. Go inside. Okay. Cool image. This is the anterior portion of the insula, and it has hubs on the central executive network, the default mode network, but it gains more powers. It is connected to virtually every major part of your brain. And if you have that in more control, and you're regulating your stress better, you're going to be empowered to live the life you want to live. That's true for most of us. Okay, here's the issue though. Because when I first started studying it, there was two branches of literature looking at interoception. One going, wow, look at all these benefits. And then the other literature was working with the clinical population. They were working with people who were suffering from various psychological disorders. If you have anxiety and you feel your heart beating starting to increase, what's that going to do? It could get into a panic attack. They're like, people who have gone through really difficult things and have these different forms of trauma and different forms of psychopathology, they're like, don't pay attention to your body. It's bad. And the other side of the literature is going, pay attention to your body, it's really good. And so it's like, how do you reconcile these two contradictory positions? That's why we need good conceptual analysis. Okay, so here's what you have to understand. The insula also plays a critical role in comparing past feelings to present feelings and anticipation of future feelings. And what if you were consistently neglected? What are you going to expect? Because your brain there is no mechanism in anyone's brain that says that's good and that's bad. That's truth, that's error. You are just going to map on your experiences from the external and internal world. And you're going to shape your brain that way. It's malleable. It's like clay, and you shape your brain through your experiences. So, if you had pleasant experiences as children, you're going to anticipate pleasant experiences as adults, and you will find them. If you didn't, and they were unpleasant, guess what? You'll find them. So, we know prior experiences fundamentally shape these processes. Okay? It's rough. And we look at, and by the way, is mental health problems a real issue right now? More than half the population is struggling. Anxiety, depression, mood disorders, dissociation, PTSD, it's all there. Okay? And so let me give you a psychological framework. We kind of talked about this. Children are incapable of understanding that you have a different perspective. Until they're 4 years old, they only know their perspective. So if I have 3-year-old Timmy, and I say, Timmy, what do you think the woman sitting in the back sees? What is Timmy going to say? What Timmy sees. He doesn't understand there's a different perspective. And so when they are being harmed or traumatized, they are going to create a belief system Because they go, my mom's a terrible person or my dad's a terrible person. That's why it's happening. They're going, there must be something wrong with me. That's why. And if there's something wrong with you and it happens before you get language, how are you going to feel? You will feel terrible inside. And it's almost a guarantee you're going to develop depression or some other form of psychopathology. These are really strong associations. So this study was really good. They studied a bunch of different, they summarized, it's called a meta-analysis. And so they basically looked at 20, 30, 40 different studies on depression. And what they found with all these studies on depression, it is defective beliefs or shame or social isolation that came from childhood trauma. I am unlovable. That's why they don't love me. I am unlovable, that's why they neglected me. But it's not a conscious thought, and if it's not a conscious thought, guess what happens? It just keeps going on. Suppressed emotions, unconscious processes don't go away. Okay? And so, how do you deal with that if it's not even a conscious thought? I guess if there's a take home from this particular slide is, as I tell all my students, don't harm children. Okay? So, a word of caution. Numerous studies are showing that people who, meditation's great, it helps us deal with anxiety. And then we have an individual who went through some really serious stuff. Neglect is terrible for you as a child. It fundamentally shapes how your brain develops. It doesn't develop properly or normally. And so let's teach them meditation. And they start meditating and all of a sudden they start getting panic. I feel anxious. And we know that so that's what autonomic hyperarousal is, that's panic, okay? Perceptual disturbances, traumatic memory re-experiencing. And when they finally get relaxed, because they let their guard down, guess what pops up? The trauma. And you freeze, okay? So it makes a lot of sense for some people who've gone through these experiences. When they start meditating, you activate the various structures that trauma was encoded in. That's how it works. We know how it works, but we also know how to work around it now, which is the good news, because it's not set in stone. You just get a blueprint. If it was a good and healthy, supportive childhood, you get a good interoceptive map, which will then project into the world as an adult. If it was a traumatic childhood, you get that internal map, which you will then project onto the external world. And you will find someone who will meet those same patterns that you experienced as a child. So first, let's make sure we're clear here. For a healthy population, most of us, meditation really increases interoception and increases emotional awareness and our ability to regulate those. There's tons of benefits coming from it. And this is actually where mindfulness can be very helpful, because when you feel that anxiety, and if it overwhelms you, go see a therapist. Don't do this on your own. But if you feel a little anxiety, that's okay. Create some distance. Go, what's behind the anxiety? You're just responding to the past. Nothing current is going to hurt you, probably, unless you're like, I don't know. Anyway. So just be present. Create that distance. Just notice. And I've got some description here if you guys want to practice it, some steps if you want to do that. It's proven to be very effective. We just got to be grounded first, have increased interoception, and then develop this mindful attentional style. But if meditation isn't working for you, what can we do? Well, if a child, all mammals, anybody heard of attachment? So all reptiles don't have this. But all mammals do. We have a biological drive to connect, to bond with the parent or the caregiver. Why? So we survive. Children are newborn children, infants, toddlers, they're the most helpless creature on the planet. I even have a teenager I swear is pretty helpless. He does dress himself though. Okay. All mammals have it's woven into our DNA. All mammals. We all need to bond with our caregiver so we survive. But it also, that connection helps us feel grounded in ourselves. It helps us develop healthy interoception, which also helps us connect with people, okay? So if you have a secure attachment, and they've identified different attachment styles with all these kinds of, with different people because of how they were raised and the experiences they went through, but about half the population has a secure attachment. They go, mom and dad were consistent when I needed them. When I cried, they picked me up. When I needed them, they soothed me. I can trust and rely on them. And that leads to healthy brain development. Normal brain development. You're not getting supercharged brain development. This is just normal brain development. Okay? But if you have an insecure attachment, you go, oh, sometimes she's there for me and sometimes she's not. I don't know what to do. So what is that going to cause a child to feel? Anxiety. If you want, that's a great formula for anxiety as an adult. Being consistent in your care, okay? And so you learn how to connect with people in the same circuitry as we pay attention to our body. It's the same. And you create this internal map of how relationships work. Sometimes they're there for me, sometimes they're not. Actually, they're rarely there for me, and then I'm gonna have an avoidant attachment, and I'm not gonna have real intimacy, emotional, psychological intimacy with anyone because I don't trust anyone, okay? And so how does this relate to interoception? For the child to become comfortable detecting, acknowledging, expressing bodily cues, because they feel, don't they? Infants don't have thoughts, but they have feelings, and they feel big time. And you help soothe them, and you help them understand it, and it goes, oh, my body is safe. But if you don't help them soothe and understand, how are they going to experience their body? That's very much unsafe. So they're going to disconnect from it and live in the default mode network, okay? And so we need to bring attention to it. We label it. And so this was some research by Christina Oldroyd. I actually know her. She's a good person. So to the extent that caregivers recognize, honor, and respect their children's bodily experiences, the child will develop a more accurate interoception and a healthy and more adaptive relational patterns. Do you know someone who, when they get stressed, they don't know how to ask for help? They don't know how to ask for their needs to be met. Or do they shut down, right? They have poor interoception because they're just repeating old patterns. So what does the adult need? A secure attachment. Even at 80, they just need someone that they can trust, that they'll be there for them no matter what. And it helps you feel connected, externally and internally. So if meditation isn't working for you, find someone that helps you feel safe and be consistent with it. How long does the attachment pattern last? How long does it take to develop a secure attachment? Over a year. At least a year. Here's a fun fact. I don't know if it's fun. Well, it's a fact. Those of you who have boys and girls, if you have children, which ones developed faster? Girls did. They were ready. They develop earlier, and both linguistically and emotionally and socially. Boys need a lot more time. They need a lot more care. But how do we raise boys in our culture? We tell them to suppress their emotions. Guess what the result is? And I see students every semester, and just ask, we all know this, ask a guy how they feel, and they'll go, oh. Why? Because they were told to suppress their feelings from very early on, and now they're adult, and they go, I don't know how I feel. And they live in their default mode network. Okay? If the bodily self remains unchanged throughout the child's adult lives, they will respond in similar ways when relationships become more complex. You ever date someone that kind of acted infantile? Did they regress a little bit? Do they demand and expect, like an infant, you take care of me, right? They're not even aware they're doing it. We've all heard the phrase, you're gonna marry your mom, or you're gonna marry your dad, right? That's attachment. This is well established. How can I feel comfortable with someone else when I don't even feel comfortable in my own body? You see how interoception is literally linked to everything we do now? It affects how you think. It affects how you remember. It affects how you interact with others. every moment is this constant process of how am I doing inside? And so many of us go, it's not great in there, so I'm just going to ignore it. Okay? So they need a secure attachment, someone who's consistent and reliable, unconditional positive regard. The vast majority of us can do well with meditation. And so I'm going to, I guess this will be the summary, and then I can, how much time do I got? Oh, shit. Is it okay if we go over a few minutes? You guys want to learn to do a breathing meditation? Okay, stop it. Interoception is about who you are. Interoception is about connection. Connection with yourself, connection with others, connection with the community and the world. And it's connection in which we heal. And we all need a little bit of healing. Some of us need a lot. Okay? So, that's my presentation. Should we do questions and then meditation? I don't know. Where's Angela?
Probably.
All right, questions then? I'll just hand this around and I'll try to ask.
At least once briefly referenced sleep benefits that students found after meditation in sleeping better. My hypothesis is that a lot of people, especially our age, start having more trouble sleeping. I think interoception, just calming the mind, actively controlling breathing, is the best method I've found for going to sleep.
Yeah.
Other people haven't been able to learn that skill.
It's tough.
Lousy teacher.
Well, I'll see if I've been doing this for 12 years, so we'll see if some of the techniques that I borrowed some techniques, but I've come up with my own that I found that just based on what students have told me is more useful. So I'll kind of walk you through it and guide a meditation. You're right. So basically the comment about sleep is your brain rewires itself after sleep. So if you want to learn a new skill that has nothing to do with meditation, focus on it, concentrate it, and then sleep. That's when you rewire it. And then that's why you wake up going, oh, I am a little bit better at this. I tell my students, don't go drinking. Don't do an all-nighter. Have you ever noticed that you stay up all night and you don't remember what you did the prior day? You're like, oh, you need to sleep in order for memory to consolidate. And you need to sleep for the brain to rewire. And I think you're right. For a lot of us, just a breathing meditation helps us fall asleep and sleep better. Almost the vast majority of my students say the same thing.
As I'm listening to you a lot, and maybe I misperceived it, because I'm basically an optimist that feels like we can always do better and get better. But a lot of what you talk about sounds like there's a lot of hard wiring that happens from your childhood, and I didn't hear a lot about how we can maybe unravel or disconnect some of those connections.
Yeah, so reconnecting the brain. You can do it through meditation. It's a controversial topic for some people. Meditation, exercise can increase interoception. Yoga, Tai Chi, any body-centered contemplative practice can do that, but also relational connections, thank you. That can help, and it takes time to rewire it. You just have to be consistent. And the last one that is really effective for people with real trauma and real psychological conditions is psychedelics-assisted psychotherapy. And those compounds deactivate the default mode network and activate the salience network really powerfully. Don't go playing with them though if you've gone through some stuff, right? Yeah, there is. It's not set in stone, but you got a blueprint. But if you're not aware of your blueprint, you'll just keep following its pattern.
So I think early in your presentation you mentioned that mindfulness was taught with the group at Pine Ridge, people that had experienced trauma. And I think you just said that psychedelics sometimes work to remedy those issues. Elaborate on that a little bit. What happened in the Pine Ridge study? How did you?
The Pine Ridge study, they taught them a body scan meditation. So remember, when they get that trauma, it gets encoded in the insula and other regions as well. But when you start paying attention to your body by doing a body scan, it's activating those same neural circuits that encoded the trauma. So it didn't make them feel any better. It brought up anxiety. And they weren't taught compensatory measures. They weren't taught actual mindfulness meditation. They weren't taught how to be an open monitoring attentional style. And so it didn't help them. With the psychedelics don't heal. It just brings the trauma up, but it opens you up to connect. That's why I say do it with a therapist. Well, you can do whatever you want. It's a word of caution.
So on Pine Ridge and Rosebud, horses are used quite a bit for developing mindfulness techniques.
Cool.
Because, it's part of the culture, but also because the horses mirror that for the participant. And then you can learn some pretty nice things about slowing your breathing or getting rid of your thoughts or thinking of things. So maybe that became the next step for people down on the reservation.
Absolutely.
Because it's been used quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with any of that, but I could see how a trusted animal, because people really are attached to their pets, how an animal can actually help them stabilize and ground and feel safer. And similar to what a human or a friend or a colleague or a spouse or whatever. Yeah, good comment.
What about what part of the brain is the mind over matter?
That is a really complex question. And so I'm not trying to skirt your answer. What is the mind?
Well, so the next thing is, so let's say that you're encoded as a young child and you had trauma, and based on your trauma experience, you made the conscious decision not to duplicate that, and it's not encoded in you, that you completely changed your experience that you had as a child.
Are you is there an example you're calling from? Because nobody escapes childhood trauma.
That's true, but back to being meditative and introspective, the acknowledgement, then as you go from age 4 through puberty, through young adulthood, to have your own children, that you make a decision to do the exact opposite.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's say your father was really abusive and I will never hit my kid, right? Yeah. People can do that. Remember, the insula is the center of agency. I am choosing not to do this. Now, and that's true. And those are heroes. Those people are heroes. They're stopping generational trauma, which is really severe, actually. Not going to get into that, but and so here's what I would kind of be aware of, and this is where mindfulness comes in. So I have 3 paragraphs of this step in mindfulness, and it's this process of actually accepting, because so many times when you're meditating, you feel anxious, and you go, I shouldn't feel anxious, and we try to use our intention not to feel that. And we call a top down, from the top of our brain down. We're trying to change our body from the top of it doesn't work. I should stop feeling anxious. Good luck. It's actually going to make it worse. And it's part of the Eastern traditions and part of the mindfulness tradition is going, okay, this is telling me something. I should be open and receptive to what it has to say. Because it is your body. It is your brain. Okay? So, did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, largely.
So then visualizations and getting in touch with your body, your brain will then think that is real.
Yep.
So that can be used in the positive.
Absolutely. And then a fight or flight response. Anybody afraid of spiders? You don't have to see a spider. You just visualize a spider crawling to you and you are in fight or flight mode. Physiologically, It could be anything that stresses you out, whether it's a spider or it's a final exam or a pretty girl. You're like, oh my God, and your body physiologically is in a state of fight or flight, and that is survival. It's the rational part of the brain goes way offline. So yes, visualization techniques can be really effective. Okay, so maybe if you have other questions, come chat with me afterwards. I just want to show you a really simple breathing technique. It's like kind of emerged in the last few years. It's really the most effective breathing technique to manage stress. And it takes 3 to 5 breaths to pull you out of the fight or flight response. And it's just called the double inhale. It's a physiological sigh. And so if you've ever seen someone like weeping and crying really hard, they start going, and they're just getting oxygen in their brain, in their body, and decreasing the carbon dioxide. And that helps you shift out of that fight or flight state. And so we're just going to intentionally use breathing to help us do that. And all you have to do is breathing in like 80%. You want 3 to 4 seconds in and like 4 to 6 seconds out. We want a longer exhale when you do that. Why? Because it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us calm down. And when you exhale, what does your diaphragm do? Drops. It's no longer pressing on your heart. Because when you breathe in, the diaphragm pushes up against your heart, and your brain, through eons of evolution, goes, when my heart is beating faster, this is a threat. On a deep unconscious level. So all we're doing is shifting from the threat to no threat as you're breathing. So it's just breathing in. So where do you focus your attention while you're doing that? Start the back of the brain, go to your chest, go to your abdomen. Every 5 breaths, just keep moving. Stay in body. And I don't know why it's the back of the brain, because people who follow their breath through their nose don't often turn off their default mode network. I've worked with lots of people. I'm like, you've been breathing for 30 days and you still can't silence your mind? What's going on? And I hooked them up to my physiological measures, and it was clear that they weren't. It's like, stop following your breath through your nose. Go to the back of your brain, go to your chest, and go to your abdomen. Or you can go to different levels of your abdomen. Just stay embodied while you breathe. That second inhale opens your alveoli sacs in your lungs, and it really increases your oxygen levels. So it just takes 3 to 5 of those breaths to get you out of the fight or flight response, and then keep going. Just do it for 5 minutes, just focusing in these regions as you... Since this is new, your mind is going to wander, and that's okay. You don't berate a toddler for learning how to walk. Good one, dumb shit. Sorry. So don't do that to yourself. You're learning. Just, and your mind will start to wander, and he's like, oh, that's okay. Just let it go. And go, let's go back to the back of my brain. And then let's go to my chest. And go to my, and you do this over a few weeks, you'll find what places you like to look and focus your attention. This is you got to be consistent with it. It's not like you're going to train for a marathon and run once a month. No. Yes, Lamaze uses those breathing techniques. Yeah. So.
Works really well on dental chairs.
Okay, good. Yeah, it calms you down. Good. So you have a receptive salience network. So that will be it for me then. If you have questions, you can come up and chat. And
So next month, the third Tuesday, is September 17th. So we will be back here at 6 p.m. that day. And our presenter will be Erica Hauptvedt from our Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences Department. And her topic, and all I know is topic, I don't know anything else yet, is science and Victorian literature. So hope to see you September 17th.